And then I saw her face. I'm a believer, and not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love.
Hey guys, CUHD here, and I am back with another reaction video. And yes, today is October 1st, and this is my very first Halloween reaction. And to start off my 2017 Halloween reactions, I'm gonna react to an MLP fanfic reading. And as for this one, this is a grimdark fanfic reading. And this one's called The Basement by TheLostNarrator. So yeah, it's been a while since I reacted to an MLP fanfic reading by TheLostNarrator. Yeah, she's awesome, I still love her. And I still want to react to her fics, guys. I mean, well, her MLP fanfic readings, because they're awesome. Anyways, let's jump right in! Okay.
Please! The little gray foal begged, as his mother dragged him across the floor. His eyes shone with hours' worth of tears, black and blue splotches painted over his body, as if it were a canvas. He did his best to put as much sadness into his expression as possible, but only succeeded in a deep grimace. With every bump of wood or dip in the floor molding, his bruises would scrape against them, and his body was filled with indescribable pain. A million tiny infernos raged beneath his skin.
So, is this mother dragging his son,
dark void of
her son, to
his
a
mother
basement?
Ignored his every plea and wince. She just stared straight ahead.
Is King
as
Summer
she
gonna
dragged him further
kill him?
through the house. The chains
You know,
that connected each
on the
sets of
thumbnail, I
cords
saw
and
King
kept
Summer's
his legs
eyes
bound,
glowing, so
clinked together the
I
entire
thought
way,
this
each
fanfic
bringing another
might be
pain and
about
wince
King Summer.
as they drew nearer to their destination. Finally, they arrived. It was an old wooden door. Chipped
An old
wood
wooden
that
door?
faded to a dull brown that reflected
Does that lead to the
contents
basement?
within. His mother stopped and dropped him onto the floor, causing another wave of shooting pain and a scream of pain from the small cult. He stared into the all-consuming darkness that threatened to swallow him whole, and gulped. Please, Mother! Don't do this! Why are you doing this to me? I don't want to go back down there! I don't want to go back down there! A tiny kick broke him free from his mother's grasp, and flopped on his chained legs in a desperate attempt to gain his footing. He slipped, and fell face first onto the floor. It was hopeless, and he knew it. The darkness was all that awaited him. His mother would not forgive him for this transgression. A sharp tug on his mane brought him out of his daze of slamming into the floor. His body was now filled with a whole new sort of pain, as he was lifted into the air, his mother using only his hair to support all of his weight.
Girl, you are a terrible mother.
Crawl back into the darkness where you belong, you little cretin! The unicorn mare screamed at the child, and struggled to keep a grip on his mane, as he twisted and turned like a madman. He kicked and screamed as she moved him back. He knew what was coming, and he had no idea if he'd be able to handle it with the existing wounds. With one Herculean heave, she sent him on a downward tumble head over hooves down the steep steps. The fool tumbled down the steps uncontrollably. Each bump hit an old bruise, or created a new one until he
falling down the stairs could hurt a lot.
And rolled over onto his stomach. Tears swelled up in his eyes as he watched the cellar door close and the last light fade. All that was left to his green eyes was darkness. He had gotten used to it by now. His eyes glinted in the small beams of light coming through the cracks of the door as they adjusted to the darkness. All around him were iron bars. A cage. Always the cage.
Is King Summer in a cage?
Bars that had slammed closed after he had come to a stop, but they held tight. He wasn't sure what hurt more. Was it the physical pain of being thrown down the set of stairs, or the emotional pain of being hated by his own family? He grunted at this predicament. No kindness, no compassion, never anything to those ponies. And yet, I'm trapped with them. It didn't matter what they did to him now. The pain all blended together into a horrid mishmash of unspoken emotions locked away into his heart. A cough from behind the door at the top of the stairs drew his attention. His head swiveled towards it in instinct, and his ears curled forward to hear the sound better. "You know what your name means, right?" His mother called from behind the door. "Sombra is a derivative of Ombra, which means shadow. You're not our son, you little beast. Our son is gone. You're just a shadow of what he once was. A disappointment. Why don't you just crawl back into the shadow and return from where you came? It'll be easier for the both of us." The sound of hooves clopping away from the door
did that boy
and slight sniffles
kill her son?
echoed in his ears, signifying his mother's departure. Sombra couldn't conjure up any words. "Why? I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this. Celestia, why do you forsaken me? Why must I be subject to this torture?" He banged against the bars of his cage, causing the cage to slam into the same indent in the side of the wall that he had beaten so many times before. The young unicorn sat in the damp and musty darkness of the cellar. He sobbed uncontrollably as he rocked back and forth. The darkness was everywhere. He might as well have been born blind. "Please, let me out. Some pony. Please." Sombra muttered under his ragged breaths. He called into the darkness for some pony to rescue him from this hell. There was never a response. Just darkness. Still,
Is Sombra gonna strike at the boy?
Listening. Reacting. It was, in a way, his only true friend. Sombra knew this darkness all too well. He'd been cast aside, never acknowledged as a living creature with a heart. The shadows wrapped his wounds and filled him with a strange sense of comfort. If he couldn't see them, then they couldn't hurt him. That was how it always worked. The darkness was always there for him, but in the back of his mind, he heard something different. A small voice.
"Hello, child.
There he is. There's Sombra.
The situation is quite sad, but I can help you. I can set you free. All you have to do is listen and learn. I promise. Then you'll have the power. Then you'll be in control. All you have to do is listen and do whatever I say."
Sombra smiled in the darkness.
Sombra's
His eyes
crazy.
glinted brighter in the darkness as the final lights went out. The stallion walked down the stairs into the basement, keeping his eyes open warily.
I only need to get in, grab my hammer, and get out. That's all. No need to be in here any longer than I need to be.
As he touched the ground, the cold floor sent a shiver down his spine. He looked at the cage. There it was, sleeping, snoozing peacefully. The stallion did his best to tiptoe around the cage and over to his tool bench. Each slight knock of his hooves against the concrete sent his heart racing and brought him to a cold sweat. He did not want to accidentally disturb the unspeakable horror it housed. He shuddered to imagine what might become of him should he be noticed. He fumbled around the tool bench, desperately searching for his hammer while making as little noise as possible. His random hoof movements caused several items to knock together, loud clinks echoing each time. Each time, he would stop in his tracks and turn his head slowly to that demon. The demon that resided in the cage.
Is King Sombra the demon?
That had not eaten, drank, or had been tended to in years, yet still continued to live and breathe. His hooves eventually came into contact with a small wooden rod and picked it up. Its top heaviness confirmed that he had found what he needed.
Oh, sweet, merciful Celestia. Thank you so much.
The stallion's tense shoulders slumped in slight relaxation as he turned to the cage again.
Good. Still asleep.
As he turned, he could see the faint light making its way through the crack at the bottom of the door. The stallion took one step and heard the sound of metal on glass, followed by a loud crash. As he looked down in terror, he noted the broken glass and nails scattered across the ground like a small blanket. The stallion felt as if a bucket of ice was washed over him. The monster trapped down there with him surely heard that noise.
Then he woke
The
up.
stallion heard the cage rattle and the ragged, raspy breathing of the being in the cage. He froze in place, hoping the darkness would hide his presence in the basement. "Father." A small voice called out from the darkness. The stallion struggled with himself. The voice seemed vulnerable. It seemed sad. It almost seemed pony-like.
Don't look at it. Don't turn around.
The frail voice continued to ring in his head. The room was silent except for the same ragged breathing. So shallow. So empty. As if something was behind it. "Father, is that you?"
I can feel it.
Voice
Something's
called
about to
him.
strike.
It was begging now, pleading with him. The stallion did his best to ignore the child as he walked towards the exit. The cage behind him rattled and shook with righteous fury. A horrible scraping and smashing sound broke the silence as the rusted cage battered with the old indentation in the wall beside it. A decade of rust scraped against the floor. The sound of nails against a chalkboard filled the entire room.
Don't listen! Ignore it. It's not real. He's not your son anymore. That thing is not your business. Leave!
"Father, why are you doing this to me? Where are you going? Don't leave me alone!" The banging and rattling increased in intensity. The stallion did his best to keep moving towards the door, looking down and making sure he wasn't stepping on any nails. "Papa, please, don't leave. It's dark. I don't like it." He stopped in his tracks and turned to face the darkness before him. His voice escaped in a sad, defeated whisper.
You're not my son! He never called me Papa! Don't you dare!
He sighed heavily as sobs and cries of sorrow and anger echoed throughout the basement.
I have to leave. Now.
The stallion was about a foot away from the door when he heard something else that he had never heard in decades. The sound of metal chains hitting the floor. Then the sound of decades of rust swinging outwards. The thought of the door
door's
opening caused
opening.
him to freeze up in fear.
Who could have possibly opened the door? There's nobody in here except me. And him.
The sound of another set of hooves clicking against the floor sent another wave of fear down his spine. They were soft and silent. They crept up next to him and came to a stop. A familiar, ragged breath blew steadily across the back of his neck. "Hello, Father. It's so dark in here."
What is that? I don't know what that was. It was so dark. Oh, Silent Ponyville too. Okay. So it was basically a story about a child who doesn't belong to a family, which a mother just dragged him into a basement and then locked him in there. And then a father is trying to do a quest that King Summer's trying to tell him in his head. And then the father hears his son crying for help, but then he turned against him, saying that he's not his son. And then he sees the door open, and he sees a creature that said, "Father." What a mysterious ending right there. I mean, I couldn't even see anything. It's just a story anyways. Well, that was my very first 2017 Halloween reaction. So if you got any Halloween videos I need to react to, put them in the comments below. Once again, guys, thanks for watching, and ahoy!